up the fact that they're just sad. If Georgia loses, I will be sad. But when you get to a certain level of hopefully emotional, spiritual, even physical maturity, you're just okay with the fact that, yeah, I'm going to lead with my chin, emotionally speaking here. And if the season ends in a disappointing way, it's going to hurt. It's going to be painful. I think Ted Lasso had a quote kind of like this, to something effect of, I forget it. Basically, like, the sadness is kind of a trade-off for having relationships and things like that matter. And college football is kind of the same way on all that. So I am ready for whatever happens next. And I'm not going to be one of these clout chasers that's like, oh, this is a special season. This is going to result in a national championship. It very well might, but that can't be guaranteed, right? I mean, that can't be guaranteed. The only thing that we know is that right now Georgia is a deserving number one. And the thing that we can reasonably assume is every team in the country would want to be where Georgia is right now. But that's obviously not a guarantee of anything. And we just got to go on for the ride. The same way we've been surprised by many things around the sport for the first 6 weeks. Over the course of the next 6 weeks of the regular season, we'll be surprised even more. And everybody's working hard to be the one still standing once January rolls around. What a fun time of year all of this is. John Hendricks got a prediction about what happens to Alabama after it's lost to Texas A&M. You better believe we'll get there before the show is done today. Richard D. says, what do you make of the commentators pointing out the Latavius Brini pass interference in the end zone and Bo Nix whining about it? Listen, let me just say this to Bo Nix. I'm going to cut a promo here for like 5 seconds. These Auburn folks don't have any room to be talking about what should and shouldn't be a penalty, especially on kind of some of the judgment call stuff between pass interference and things like that. And you can say, well, B.A., you're just a Georgia fan. That's why you're saying that. Look, go back and watch the officiating in that Auburn-Georgia State game. If officiating's called exactly the way it's supposed to be, Auburn's toting an L to a group of 5 team into that day on Saturday. So Bo Nix is like, we never get these calls. You got the dadgum call against Georgia State, would have lost the game if you didn't. So let's just slow down here on the, who gets calls and who doesn't. By the way, I think we're on the other platforms now, Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, Twitch. Yeah, we're already ranting here a little bit, but it's going to be that kind of day around the program. A lot of good comments coming in. John, is it Jabely? I hope I pronounced that name correctly. On the subject of Aaron Murray, we're ready to start the show after this. So I know a lot of folks were unhappy that they felt like Murray was too down the middle, even some folks saying he veered in the direction of Auburn a little bit. Here's what I'll tell you. This is a very tough needle to thread. And for an inexperienced commentator, which Murray still is, it's incredibly difficult. And I haven't gone back to rewatch the TV game yet. I just hadn't had time to. It would not surprise me at all to hear that Murray veered too much in the other direction because, you want to do this for a living, right? And if you get tabbed as just a Georgia guy cheerleading for your alma mater, a lot of these guys are led to believe, oh, that's the end of you as a broadcaster. No one's going to take you seriously. There's a lot more folks watching this game who are not Georgia fans than are Georgia fans, even though obviously Georgia fans the biggest contingent of folks tuned in for it. When you get to be a little older, a little bit more experienced as a broadcaster, I think you know how to just be a little bit more natural, a little bit more truly neutral. Like watch David Pollack on ESPN. David Pollack he praise on Georgia. David Pollack will sometimes criticize Georgia. He's been doing it enough now that I think you're led to believe, oh, he's just calling balls and strikes. When he sees Georgia do something well, he'll praise that. When he sees Georgia do something poorly, he'll criticize that. He feels the freedom to do that on both sides. I think that's what Kirk Herbstreit's kind of arrived at when it comes to his own alma mater with Ohio State. He can praise the Buckeyes, he can criticize them, and he's kind of earned the right to be taken at face value with whatever he says. For a guy like Murray, he's just, at the first rung of the ladder in comparison to the guys that I just mentioned. It's much more difficult to do. Broadcasting is one of those things that you just get better at doing it over time. And in a booth like that, Murray just hasn't had a lot of reps yet. He may get more of them, and at a certain point, he may be in the category of some of the guys that I just mentioned. But for now, I think what you notice about Murray is not any kind of hostility towards Georgia. It's just a guy who's green. He just hasn't been in the broadcast booth very much. And you just get better the more that you do it. And I think the inexperience, if he has that, can kind of play tricks in your mind a little bit and get you probably overthinking things a little too much. I mean, I can tell you this from doing the show, and then after this, we're going to do the show. The way in which that when I have a good show, to the extent that I've ever even had one, but when I do have a good show, mentally, I'm kind of thinking about nothing. That's always like the mental place you want to be. You don't want to be thinking about trying to be too much of this or too much of that or saying this, not saying that. You just kind of want to be thinking about nothing. Like literally don't even know the next word you're about to say and just let it come flowing out. You hear athletes talk about being kind of in a flow state or kind of in the zone. You just kind of want to be in that state where you're just kind of just doing it. You're not thinking about it. You're just doing it. And when you're inexperienced, I do think you have a tendency to kind of think about what you're doing as opposed to actually just going out and doing the thing. And so for those of you that had issues with Murray, it's probably his inexperience you're noticing as much as maybe anything else. All right. So with that said, let's get ready to do our show, and y'all can judge me on how well I do with it today. It's John Stinchcomb stopping by. It is a big look around the rest of the SEC because, my oh my, what a wild one that was, and we may or may not even get to some of the stuff outside the SEC, which was pretty crazy there as well. It is just going to be a big, big day. Dogs are number one. Kentucky's coming calling on Saturday. Big national TV spotlight on that game, but before that, we got to talk about what Georgia did by taking down Auburn on Saturday. They deserve a lot of credit for it. So let's do that now. DawgNation Daily, daily podcast for Georgia Bulldogs fans, presented by Pella Window and Door of Georgia, begins right now.
Today's episode of DawgNation Daily is brought to you by Pella Window and Door of Georgia, viewed to be the best.
Presented by DawgNation.com. This is DawgNation Daily, the daily podcast for Georgia Bulldogs fans. Here's your host, Brandon Adams.
I got to tell you, it is fun to wake up and do this show to start a Monday morning with the thought that the Georgia Bulldogs here are the number one team in the country. And when you look around, when you see how everything is playing out here, I think the one thing that you're left to conclude is Georgia deserves to be number one. It would be a crime against Georgia if we're going to have polls. If polls are going to matter. And obviously being number one at the end of the season is the thing that matters the most. We all understand that doesn't even need to be said. It's literally, it's self-evident. It doesn't need to be said. But if we're going to have polls, if we're going to rank somebody in this sport at number one right now, the team that should be ranked number one on the basis of how the first half of the regular season has played out, we're now at the halfway point there for the regular season. That's clearly the Georgia Bulldogs. And you know what? I'm excited about it. I'm happy about it. I don't mind telling you that. And I'm really excited about having ESPN's College Game Day coming back to Athens on Saturday. Boy, you look at the replies when ESPN put this out yesterday, and we had been kind of talking. There had been some chatter over the course of the last couple of days from folks inside the program that, hey, this might be coming down the pipe. Maybe a chance, especially given how some of the other results might play out around college football. That Game Day could be coming back, so we were kind of on guard for most of Saturday night. That Sunday might include that story, and when the Game Day tweet came out and all those replies coming in, people are so mad. You might as well just be the UGA pregame show at this point in time. Because not only is this the second consecutive home game that ESPN's Game Day's been at Georgia, we've only had 6 weeks of the show, and Game Day's been at Georgia, been a part of the Georgia game for 3 of those weeks. That there is just a lot of Georgia on ESPN's College Game Day here this week. I think that show still matters. And I think it's a good thing that Georgia is there. And here's the point that I'm going to come back to. All of the attention that Georgia is getting right now is justified. All of the attention that Georgia is earning for itself is very much the deserved prize for the way this team has played, including this past Saturday at Auburn. Being at Jordan-Hare Stadium, the environment, the atmosphere there was very much the way that I expected it to be. We knew the crowd would be loud. It was. It was fun. First of all, the weather was beautiful. It was a little bit hot, but the weather itself was beautiful. And being around campus before the game, you saw all the big RVs. You saw all the tailgating. It very much felt like a real live SEC atmosphere all the way around there. And you knew that for Auburn, this was going to be their chance to try to see if they could strike against Georgia and kind of right the ship of their season after the near miss against Georgia State, the loss to Penn State. This was like that big rallying moment there for Auburn. And those first 10, 15 minutes of this game in the first quarter, we're going to tell you so much about that. Auburn jumps out to the 3-0 lead. Georgia has 17 unanswered points after that. And then for the most part, the game was fully in Georgia's control after that. I thought the way in which Georgia did this on Saturday, in a year that we can now say is a chaos year in college football. And sometimes I worry about how to describe some of this, because if you're the kind of person like I am, and a lot of us around here are, who are obsessed with college football, you understand the fact that certain seasons are just different than others, that certain seasons just have a degree of chaos where it seems like week after week after week, there are these wildly unpredictable results where almost anything can happen, and it becomes one of those reasons that a lot of people love college football as much as they do. The casual fan maybe understands this a little bit less, but at one point in time a couple of weeks ago, it came up on this show of, is this going to be one of these chaos years? Is this going to be one of these years where everything just seems so topsy-turvy and from week to week you're on this roller coaster ride of emotions? And at the time, I kind of said, no, maybe this stabilizes at a certain point, and this ends up feeling a little bit more normal than some people feel like we were kind of heading to there at one point in time. Well, now after the Alabama loss on Saturday, you can officially say this is a chaos year. You can officially say that around most of the places in college football, almost anything seemed possible right now. No one, very few people, if anyone, would have predicted Texas A&M beating Alabama on Saturday, yet that's what happened. And concurrent to this wildness, concurrent to this drama, concurrent to all of the unpredictable outcomes week after week after week. We've already set a record for most ranked teams to lose, and that record seems to be broken almost each and every week. Concurrent to all of that, here is Georgia, just going about its business, suffocating, just absolutely annihilating a big rival in Auburn, ranked game. Tigers throwing everything they could at the Dogs there early, and Georgia just emerges. Georgia was just the tougher team on Saturday. And I loved the way Smart talked about this in his post-game press conference, the specific ways in which, the specific reasons why he gave his team credit for all of that. Let me let you hear Kirby Smart on what emerged about Georgia in Jordan-Hare Stadium against Auburn on Saturday. This is Kirby.
What a tough environment to play in. Give a lot of credit to Auburn, their fans. They've created an electric environment. And for a lot of our players, I mean, probably over 50%, I would even say more than 50% of the guys that were playing, they've never played in a road environment. And that, two of our DNA traits are composure and toughness. And I thought never has that been more evident than today. Composure and toughness. And the men in that locker room never doubt, never question each other. A really physical game, guys. That was a really physical game. And now we've had two of those really physical games back to back. I told you we were beat up coming into it, and we're probably more beat up coming out of it. But I'm proud of the way the guys competed, man. Golly, just a lot of toughness showed through in that game.
How many times did Kirby Smart use the word toughness right there? Boy, it seems like a lot, right? And he says, we want toughness and we want composure, and far be it from me to try to put words in Smart's mouth or rearrange his own words. But when I hear him say we want toughness and composure, what I'm hearing him say is the toughness is related to your physical toughness. Composure to me seems related to your mental toughness, your spiritual toughness, that emotional part of your toughness that's not about how strong you are, how many hard hits you're willing to absorb, but can you be in an environment like that and have 80, 90,000 people cheering for you to fail and just shrug it all off and say, I'm going to go out here and do my job no matter what. Smart says, I saw that physical toughness from my team. I saw that mental toughness from my team, and I was proud of the way that all of that came together to compete there on Saturday, which led to what I thought was a very good question from our colleague Connor Riley from DawgNation. Smart said the Clemson game, you're either elite or you're not. And the word elite has seemingly come up a lot around Georgia here this year. And so Connor, sometimes the shortest questions are the best questions. So Connor to Kirby says, hey, did you think today your team was elite? And I thought Smart gave a good answer to a good question, and it kind of a continuation of the audio we just heard from Kirby. This is Kirby on whether or not he saw elite. Is it eliteness? Is that a word? Eliteness? Did he see eliteness from his team on Saturday?
Elite can be a loose term. I thought that we were elite at times. I never used the term that we're elite. We didn't force turnovers enough to be elite. You know what I mean? And I thought offensively I'd have to see the stats, but I thought we made some explosives at the right time. What we were elite toughness, and we were elite composure. Nolan Smith, who's one of our leaders, had a bonehead penalty, and I told him, wipe it up, fold it up, throw it away, let it go. It's over. Go play. And we can't have those on the road. And we'll learn from that. But there's a lot of opportunities our players had to have bad composure or lose energy, and they didn't do that.
So once again, I think that's really strong stuff there from Kirby Smart. And I guess here's the point I want to get to. And let me see if I can tie together the whole, hey, I thought my team was tough at Auburn, mental tough, physical tough, I thought my team was tough, to the stuff we started the show saying, number one in the country, ESPN's College Game Day, and all of the sideshow circus stuff happening around the program right now. Here's the thing about toughness. Toughness is a little bit of a finite resource. What I mean by that is you can only be tough for so long. At a certain point in time, to be tough, both physically and mentally, you got to have some rest at a certain point in time. Or you've got to have that moment in which you kind of regenerate that energy level. Smart has talked before about the idea of straining. How long can you strain on a play, full maximum effort, and then stretch that maximum effort just a little bit longer? Well, you can only strain for so long before you either have to be rested or encouraged, and then you kind of regenerate that energy and kind of get back to it. And this is where the game day stuff, once again back in Athens, the number one ranked stuff, and all the love that Georgia's getting right now, this is where I think that's actually a good thing for the program. Because the one thing I can't do anymore is, we did a little bit on the rat poison thing last week. I'm just sort of over that. Y'all, don't overthink this. Of course you want to be number one. Of course you want ESPN College Game Day at your stadium on Saturday. I did this with our video audience as part of our First and 15 a moment ago. This is the entertainment business. The teams that cultivate the most entertaining atmosphere around their program get the best players. The best players play in the biggest games. The team with the best players win those big games, and that's just the cycle of life in college football. Don't overthink this. It's great to be number one. It's great to have ESPN College Game Day at your venue on Saturday, and there's really nothing more that needs to be said about that other than that. But on the idea of all of those, what I would think of as kind of fun things happening around the program, that if you want to kind of regenerate that energy that allows you to be tough, making the season fun is an important part of that. That the more fun you're having, the easier it is for you to be tough mentally and physically for those long stretches in those times, especially on the road in the SEC, when you have to be able to do that, which really kind of takes us back to something we discussed right at the beginning of the year, before the season began, which is that you can kind of thin slice this. There are 1,000 stats, and there's all this, football's X's and O's talk, and, blah, 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 Mr. Football this, Mr. Football that. But sometimes the simplest things are just the truest things. And we said, hey, judge for yourself. Are you having fun watching this team play? If the team's fun to watch, if they seem like they're having fun playing the games, we said this before the season began. You can go back and find the archives. If the team seems like it's having fun, if you yourself having fun watching the team, then the odds are the season's probably going in the direction you want it to go. Now imagine this just for a moment. Georgia's got 8 bazillion injuries right now. Status of your starting quarterback, totally unknowable. All of this is kind of out there in the periphery. Yet ask yourself this question. Did you have fun on Saturday? I had a blast. I had so much fun on Saturday. Did it look like the team was having fun on Saturday? You better believe it did. And right now, and sometimes, that is all you really need to know. This team's a ton of fun to watch, and that enjoyable, entertaining atmosphere, I think, is creating the kind of energy level needed to be as tough as Kirby Smart says they needed to be. Now, with that said, let me slightly shift gears to something else just for a moment, because you cannot talk about what happened against Auburn on Saturday, and you cannot talk about what is likely to happen over the next couple of weeks at Georgia without discussing the emergence of Ladd McConkey. Y'all, this is really happening. This is not one of those, kind of a nice story, guy, has a play here or there and, kind of earned some sort of fan favorite status because of the fact that he kind of came from out of nowhere to even get a Georgia scholarship. As of now, McConkey, and you saw it on Saturday, huge numbers finding the end zone. McConkey is not just, oh, boy, how about that? A relatively lowly rated recruit found his way onto the field for Georgia. Smaller, only 180-something pounds or whatever. Smaller guy having this great success. That this is a guy right now that's become a real weapon for Georgia. And if you're going to celebrate the win against Auburn, and you should, mentioning the role that Ladd McConkey played in all of this, I think is a important part of that discussion point there as well. This is Kirby on what he sees when he sees Ladd McConkey, a little bit of biographical information from Kirby here too, which is valuable as well.
I saw a heart of a warrior. I sat in that young man's home, and he didn't have one Power 5 offer, and he wanted to play big time football, and all he did was make catches, punt return, make plays, and it's not his fault who he goes against. I watched him play basketball one night and said, I want this guy on my team. And his parents were wonderful people and jumped all over the opportunity to come play at Georgia. And I think any player on our team will tell you Ladd McConkey outworks every guy out there. And he plays with physical toughness at 184 pounds. And today, he made some plays. He made plays in the vertical passing game, and really proud of him. And he moved positions. He didn't play the slot today. He played Z. And I thought that was a tremendous job by our coaches and by a young man that is everything right about college football. This guy wants to win for Georgia. And the more guys you get like that on your team, Dan Jackson's another one that cares about it. Warren McClendon cares about it. They care about this university, and you see it the way they play.
It is very bad for the rest of college football what Georgia was able to do on Saturday, because it's really the combination of two completely different things. You know how on offense we talk about being left-handed, being right-handed, the ability to kind of throw counter punches and not just be one thing all the time? Clearly, Georgia's knockout punch is its ability to hoard five-star talent. That's the thing that people know about Georgia, that nobody has more talent. And think about this for a moment. I've got to be very quick with this. But you can make a case that Georgia's obviously the most talented defensive team in the country, yet off of the Georgia roster that guys have been recruited in recent years that could all be playing for Georgia right now, you can make a case that Ole Miss's best defensive player, Otis Reese, is a former Georgia guy. You can make a case that Florida State's best defensive player, Jermaine Johnson, is a former Georgia guy. You can make a case that Tyreek Stevenson might be Miami's best defensive player. That's a former Georgia guy. And you remember Brenton Cox? He could also still be eligible at Georgia there as well. You can make a case that he might be Florida's best defensive player. All these are former Georgia guys. That Georgia's ability to hoard defensive talent and just five-star talent all across the board is so prodigious. They have guys that have left the program and gone on to be the best players in other programs there as well. That's how amazing Georgia has been at hoarding talent, and people now know that about UGA. But parallel to that, now Georgia's also going to take Dan Jackson as a walk-on and make him a guy capable of playing and collecting a bunch of tackles on Saturday, stepping in, not skipping a beat when Christopher Smith got injured on Saturday at the safety position. Now Ladd McConkey's going to be one of these guys that's not just one day eventually good enough that he's able to compete and contribute, but also be the kind of guy that is able to contribute almost right away, here in 2021 to what Georgia's trying to do. This is now also what Georgia's doing when it comes to its offense, when it comes to what it's able to bring to the table. That's a pretty powerful statement about Georgia right now. It's not good news for the rest of college football when you see the combination of elite five-star talent playing that way for Georgia, elite high four-star talent playing that way for Georgia, and now Georgia also really developing those lesser-known recruits there as well. That's bad news for the rest of college football, but it's a perfect formula for UGA. Number one in the country, looking to defend that status this Saturday against Kentucky. Times are good indeed for Dog fans. My name is Brandon Adams, and this is DawgNation Daily, the daily podcast for Georgia Bulldogs fans, presented today by Pella Window and Door of Georgia. Great to have you with us no matter how you get to us today. Live on video, 10 a.m., Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, Twitch, on the radio at noon, on Athens Sports Radio 960 The Ref, podcast form. However you get to them, worldfamousDawgNation.com or Apple, Google, Spotify, SoundCloud, all kinds of ways to listen to the podcast. We just really appreciate you doing it. And a huge thanks to our friends at Pella Window and Door of Georgia for making this show possible. Of course, Pella Window and Door of Georgia can help equip your house with energy-efficient windows and doors. And this is valuable for so many reasons. Makes your house look better on the outside. That could add to your resale value. Makes your home feel better on the inside. Yesterday was really warm. We're still cranking that AC inside of my house, and the last thing I want is that air conditioning escaping out the crevices of inefficient, poorly installed windows or doors. You don't want that. You want what Pella Window and Door of Georgia provides you, because they're a nationally known company, which means you get unparalleled resources, but they're locally owned with a branch right here in Georgia, which means you get that unrivaled family-oriented service. You can meet with them in person. You can do a virtual consultation if that's what you want to do, and one of their experts will walk you through all the installation options that are available to you. And if you want good savings, well, Pella's got that for you there as well. Through October 28th, you can get 40% off qualifying installations, or 0% interest if you pay for your project in full within 12 months with regular payments. Great warranties here, there as well, and just some of the most expert folks when it comes to how better windows and doors can help improve your quality of life and improve your home. That's what Pella Window and Door of Georgia provides. So a couple different ways for you to get in touch. You can go to PellaofGA.com/DawgNation. That website, once again, PellaofGA.com/DawgNation. Or you can give them a call, 678-638-1496. That's 678-638-1496. Just do me a favor. tell them that BA from DawgNation Daily told you that they will take good care of you, because I know they will, and I truly believe that there today. So make sure you check all of that out with our friends at Pella Window and Door of Georgia. All right, it's John Stinchcomb here coming up in just a moment. Before we get to John and talk more about what he saw with Georgia and Auburn and now kind of what the second half of the regular season is going to look like for UGA, quarterback stuff, everything else there as well. Before we get to any of that kind of stuff, let's go around the doghouse here for a moment. Presented and assisted today by our friends at AAA. And I believe there is something for Georgia that is getting overlooked. And I think the reason why it's getting overlooked is fairly obvious. As I said, there is a little bit of intrigue with how healthy JT Daniels is, when he might play again for UGA. There's a little bit of maybe wonderment at the fact that guys like Ladd McConkey and A.D. Mitchell, two guys who are, somewhat lesser recruits, are already this good so soon for UGA. All of this kind of stuff justifiably is getting a lot of attention for the program. But in the midst of all of this, the thing that I think is getting overlooked is that if you want to kind of come up with names on the list for why Georgia's currently number one, and names on the list for why Georgia has a chance to still be number one once the season comes to an end, I think the name that doesn't get talked about enough is Todd Monken. I believe that Todd Monken, the offensive coordinator for the Georgia Bulldogs, is having a sensational year for UGA. And I want you to hear what Kirby Smart said about Monken after the game on Saturday, because I think we need to make sure that we give Monken the credit he's due. This is Kirby.
I thought Monken did a great job calling the game, tying the run game to the play action. And the play actions only work, if you got guys that can run and you got a run game that's working. So the better the run game is, obviously the play action shots work. And thought there were some very timely calls there to get some explosives, and a lot of young players stepped up. Look, I had no idea if you had told me we were coming into Auburn this year 6 months ago and we would have had Ladd and A.D. Mitchell, playing our X and Z. Who would have thought that?
Yeah, obviously you wouldn't have necessarily expected those two guys to be doing what they're doing now, but don't get hung up in the names. Don't get hung up in who's playing quarterback. And eventually that's going to matter, and we've obviously got to talk more about, when JT Daniels expects to return and kind of what Georgia can do without JT Daniels. Obviously worked out pretty well on Saturday. Those are all topics for discussion. But you can't lose sight of the fact that what Georgia's doing offensively, regardless of who it has in the game, Bennett, Daniels, the receivers you expected to have, the receivers it turns out that you have, what Monken is doing is working. And when I possibly can, sometimes football admittedly is really complicated. Sometimes football admittedly requires a lot of expertise to make sense of what's happening. But sometimes, bad grammar intentional here, that just ain't true. Sometimes football is really pretty simple. Let me give you a very simple thing about Georgia that you might not have noticed. Since Todd Monken has been offensive coordinator at Georgia, there has been massive, massive improvement in the output for UGA. And I'm not going to give you any kind of advanced stats on this. I'm not going to give you any kind of math nerd analytics. Let me just give you the stat that matters more than any other. How many dadgum points are you scoring? Nothing matters more than that. Go back to 2019 for a moment. Georgia was just fifth in the SEC at just 30.8 points per game. Y'all, that's not good enough. Georgia was not, I don't care what their ranking was, I don't care how many big games they played in. Georgia was not a true, legitimate national championship contender in 2019 because it couldn't score enough points. Simply as that, they were not explosive enough offensively to be at that championship level. Even if the eventual national champion that year, LSU, wasn't historically good on offense, Georgia still wouldn't have been good enough offensively. But since Todd Monken has been on the job, there has been drastic improvement. Let me go to 2020 for a moment. Georgia goes from 30.8 points per game in 2019. In 2020, Georgia's now averaging 32.3 points per game. Now, let me tell you why that matters. Because in 2019, the number that Georgia put up, slightly over 30, that was actually greatly inflated because Georgia, scored 60-something against Murray State and 50-something against Arkansas State. They scored, 50-something against Tech that year. Georgia had 3 games of 50-plus points against weak non-conference opponents that actually inflated its overall point total. In 2020, you were only playing SEC teams, and against a tougher schedule than it had played in 2019, Georgia's points per game went up. They were 32.3 points per game, more than 2 points per game more from 2019 to 2020 in the first year of Todd Monken. Now, compare that to where things are right now. Georgia's fourth in the SEC in scoring per game right now. They were averaging 39.8 points per game here. 39.8 points per game. That's how much of an improvement this is for Georgia. This, if it keeps up, would be the most points per game that Georgia has scored in any of the seasons under Kirby Smart. Even 2017 when Georgia made the college football playoff, 2018 when Georgia was actually pretty good offensively. This is on pace to be the best points per game scoring offense of the Kirby Smart era, and they're doing it with like 7 or 8 guys missing. And the reason why they're doing that, you've got to give credit to Todd Monken for what he's been able to do. And yes, I know it's got to continue. And yes, I know eventually the competition, at least by the time you get to December, is going to get tougher. I realize all of that. But stop and appreciate what's happening. We've given a ton of credit to the Georgia defense, and we should. We've remarked the fact that Georgia has all these injuries, and that really matters. But the Todd Monken scheme, regardless of the players that he's been given to work with, the Todd Monken scheme is working. They've never been scoring more points on a week-in, week-out basis than what they're doing right now. Monken deserves a lot of credit for that. It's Around the Doghouse. It's assisted today by our friends at AAA, and obviously what Georgia's doing offensively right now is working, and what you're doing can work for you as well if you make the decision to do more than just trust AAA for your legendary roadside assistance. I was traveling a lot this week, right? Driving across the state, going to Auburn and on the road a lot this time of year. I think about AAA for that. The car breaks down. I'm glad to know that AAA can come rescue me from whatever issue I might be dealing with there. But that's not the only thing you need to think about when it comes to AAA. They can also take care of you on your auto insurance there as well, because when you switch and save with AAA today, you can save on average $529. That's big savings. That's real money that can go back in your pocket. $529 you can save. So check out AAA.com/auto insurance. That's AAA.com/auto insurance. Switch and save your auto insurance to AAA here today. All right. Wow, wild week in the SEC. We will cover all of that, Alabama losing and everything that means before our show is done today. We'll also welcome back a great sponsor for the first time in a while. I'm looking forward to doing that a little bit later on. But for now, on everything from Georgia Auburn, Kentucky looming on Saturday, and all of the attention coming the way of the Dogs these days. Let's find out about all of it with our buddy John Stinchcomb, the former UGA All-American, as we get a Classic City Lager Insider Update with John Stinchcomb right now.
From Athens and across the SEC or wherever the recruiting trail may lead, here's a DawgNation.com insider.
All right, great stuff. John Stinchcomb here, Classic City Lager Insider Update with him. And John, I'm happy to have you in the program. Your insight always matters to me on these days after games. When Kirby Smart talked about his team a moment ago, man, he used that word toughness seemingly half dozen times at least, both the mental variety and the physical variety. Obviously, another chance for Georgia to show that on Saturday, how tough it could be in a tough environment. And Georgia, I think, certainly proved that. What else do you think we learned about Georgia in this spot against a hated rival with the chance to move to number one with a win? That all works out that way. What did we learn about UGA on Saturday?
I think we learned that they can be consistent. Playing in big games, when you're a good team, when you're at the top of the heap, then you're going to play in more big games. And Georgia has been able to answer that call. I think we've all circled the month of October, and even more so as the season has played out, as vital and a great test for Georgia. And halfway through, they certainly have answered the call and stepped up in a major way. I thought, you come out and you're playing against a team that's wanting to knock you off, and quite honestly, I thought Bo Nix, put them in situations to compete at times, and despite the fact that he's whining about a call after the game, he certainly did. He certainly put out a performance that was a test for Georgia's defense, and I think that's what you can expect from our defense, is being able to face some opponents that are trying to play their best game against you and being able to step up. But who liked that comment at the end of the game? Anybody?
No doubt about that. You also use a word there that I think is really important to park on for a moment. I think it's very, very succinct and well said. that Georgia has been consistent in a year in which college football outside of Athens, Georgia, has not been consistent at all. You know, the entire ACC, literally anything can happen in that league from week to week. We've seen surprises amongst all the other ranked teams as well for the most part. The wild comeback for Oklahoma, you know, the shootout between Arkansas and Ole Miss. There's so many moments from Saturday that feel anything but consistent here. But the fact that Georgia sort of shows up at the ballpark each and every week, and you kind of know exactly what to get. Now, the Clemson game feels like a long time ago now. That was probably Georgia's weakest effort of the season against the Clemson team that's turned out not to be very good. But beyond that, Georgia has just shown up very businesslike, you know, almost like, you know, like the assassin from the movie just kind of shows up stone-faced and just kind of does the deed that needs to be done and then packs up and leaves. That's a little bit like what Georgia is on a week-in, week-out basis. I don't think that consistency should be taken for granted just given how inconsistent so much of the rest of college football has been.
I'd say that's one of the hardest things to achieve is consistently great performances. And you can talk about across a season, really across a game, but you look at the best programs, and I hold them in the highest regard because they're able to maintain a high level of play throughout the year, across years, and that's a look at some of these teams out there, and they can get up for a big game, and then you got 3 or 4 weeks off, but for your top teams, and Georgia is obviously and gratefully so, number one team in the country.
That's right.
Golly, it feels good and hard earned, but it is a difficult task to not rest on your last performance and realize that each week you're going to get your opponent's best punch, and Georgia hasn't been fazed by that up to this point. They're not concerned, or at least it doesn't appear to be, any concern for who's across from them. They're coming out to play their best football. And when a team does that, I think it shows. I think it shows on their performance. And Georgia, it has been that way all season long so far.
No, I think you're absolutely right about that.
And we'll need to continue to be so, B.A. I mean, geez.
No, I think you're right.
It'll be that way this year.
I think you're right about all of that. I want to talk to you about some of this attention that's come the way of the Georgia Bulldogs here in just a moment. Obviously, some of that because of the fact that Alabama lost Texas A&M on Saturday. This was a thrilling game and kind of coming from out of nowhere, just given the fact that the Aggies had not been great this season prior to that. But Zach Calzada has a terrific night. Kicker makes a gutsy kick there at the end. There's a great viral video coming out there now for the way in which his family celebrated with him after all that was all said and done. And when you see Alabama suffer through what Georgia to this point in time thankfully has not suffered through yet, I mean, I think you're left to wonder, what does all this mean for UGA? What are your big takeaways for the Dogs? After the Alabama loss, how does this impact Georgia one way or another, if it does at all?
Well, hopefully they don't realize this, the guys in the locker room, but I think it provides a little bit of cushion just because all the top teams are accumulating that one loss. And, I don't even want to bring it up, to be honest with you, B.A., because right now the focus for Georgia should be on Georgia and continuing to do what they've done this season and prepare for and totally dismantle whichever opponent they're facing this week. And, it's another big test in coming into town with Kentucky. I think we match up exceptionally well, and, you finish out the month with Florida, and that's two really big games for our program. But really, what does it mean? I think, hopefully our guys don't focus on this, but I think it gives you a little leeway if we were to have that slip up and still be able to accomplish your goals, because across the country there hasn't been consistency in any other program like Georgia's demonstrated week in and week out this year.
The other thing, John, is I think it's going to have an impact on the way that I talk about the team and talk about the games week to week in this regard. The last couple of years, Alabama in 2020, LSU in 2019, maybe Clemson in 2018, but certainly the last couple of years, you could make a case that the national champion was historically good. And I may even include Clemson in that discussion for a little bit, just given how badly they beat a very good Alabama team in the national championship game that year. That these were teams that had 1 million first-round picks. They were dominant both offensively. LSU not so much defensively, but they did have a bunch of pro-type guys in that defense. The point is that if you wanted to win the national championship in any of the last 3 years, the standard for doing so really required you to be historically good. You had to be one of the best teams ever, not just the best team in the country in that given year. You had to be one of the best teams of all time. I would say that in 2021, the bar's a little lower than that. Now, we may find out that Georgia's one of the best teams of all time based on what it does over the course of the next 9 games that it could play. But for right now, the competition out there for Georgia, what's standing in its way to potentially win the national championship, does not appear to be historically good, which means that just winning may be enough, whereas just winning alone would not have been enough the last couple of years. You were measuring yourself against the all-time standard. Now you just have to be the best in the country for this particular year, which means if you're doing what you did Saturday, if you can replicate that 9 more times, you're probably holding the trophy at the end of the year.
Yep, I think that's a fair and accurate assessment. I think you look at really the past 4, 5, 6 years, and the teams that have won the national championship were elite in what they did. And Georgia was fielding really good football teams, and really good wasn't enough in those years. So I think it's a down year, if you will, just for the elite programs that we're used to. Obviously, Clemson has eliminated themselves from that discussion of being one of those impact teams this year, and we've seen the vulnerabilities really from every program, and Alabama showed their weaknesses against the Texas A&M team that, quite honestly, you watch them and you think, man, their offensive line was struggling early, and and Alabama, what was it, a block punt for a touchdown? You're like, here we go. This is Alabama. They're about to do what they normally do, and so you don't have that elite team out there unless you're talking about the one in Athens, and I just hope that stays true and consistent for the rest of the season.
It's our Classic City Lager Insider Update with John Stinchcomb right now. Obviously, a lot of folks getting ready for Athens on Saturday. It means packing up another tailgate. And obviously, Classic City Lager goes great with that from Creature Comforts Brewing Company. It's a taste of Athens. Lager-style beer, lighter beer, which means it's easy drinking, especially on these nice warm weekends like we've had this past weekend and maybe this upcoming weekend there as well. But no sacrifice on flavor, because when it's Creature Comforts Brewing Company, you know you're getting a craft-style lager, which means there's a lot of care taken to make sure the flavor's just perfect, bold, crisp flavor notes. That's what Classic City Lager is famous for. It's also easy to find there as well. It's available 6 or 12-pack cans wherever you're doing your shopping, whatever store you're going to for that. You can find Classic City Lager from Creature Comforts Brewing Company. So pick some up as you head towards the weekend, as you head towards whatever you're doing this time of year. Classic City Lager goes great with it. It's simple. It's just good cold beer. We love Classic City Lager around here, and we believe that you will there as well. So check it out wherever you're shopping from our friends at Creature Comforts Brewing Company. It's a taste of Athens, but you don't have to be in Athens to get it. John, speaking of Athens on Saturday, ESPN's College Game Day returns back for the second consecutive home game for Georgia, and the Dogs will have a freshly minted number 1 ranking next to their name when they play that. I always think about Brooke Whitmire, the stadium PA announcer. That's really about the only time I ever think about what Georgia is ranked, when they run out on the field, and Whitmire will kind of give you the number 1 ranked Georgia Bulldogs, and that's how the team kind of takes the field there at that spot. I think all of this is really fun. I'm not afraid of that attention. I think it's good for the program in a business sense. I think it's also just enjoyable for those of us who want to be a part of a football storyline that matters. Clearly, Georgia does. What do you think about all the attention that Georgia's conjuring for itself right now?
I think it's hard-earned. I think they've proven so far this season that they are the number 1 team, and I don't know. You have to look back, and I'm sure there's some statisticians out there that would know the answer better than I would. But when was the last time that a team hosted 2 college game days out of the past 3 weeks?
Amazing, right?
I mean, I think it just shows that the level of play from Georgia, the competition that they're facing is worthy of college game day, and that really, speaking to the last point that you brought up, there's not a lot of teams that have looked great so far this season, and Georgia's the exception to that. And I think they're being recognized and honored appropriately with being tagged the number one team in the country, and 2 of the past 3 weeks getting College game day. So I think it's hard-earned. Based on performance so far, it's not like you see in the performance of Georgia's players or coaches and the way they're attacking these games that they're reading a lot of their own press clippings and getting distracted because the performance on the field certainly hasn't suffered in a way that you'd say, man, it seems like they've let off the gas and maybe they're focused on the wrong thing. That has most certainly not been the case so far.
All right, let me slam on the parking brake before I let you go here because we can't have this much fun. At some point in time, you got to bring something negative into the discussion. John, how worried are you about the injuries for Georgia that continue to mount? And I asked this knowing full well that thus far Georgia's just handling it all and moving right on. And the next man up mentality really is working out that way. But my gosh, you had both your safeties leave the game on Saturday. You had your, what I view as top offensive lineman, Jamari Salyer. He leaves the game there as well. We're speaking on a Monday morning here. This is before Kirby Smart hopefully gives us some important updates on that, later on this afternoon with his weekly press conference. Your starting quarterback, well documented that he's not out there for you right now. Don't know when that's going to change. Obviously, the entirety of the receiving corps seemingly has dealt with injury here. At a certain point in time, do you worry about it getting too much? It hasn't been too much yet, but Saturday was also a costly day in that regard there, too. How concerned are you about just what appears to be a growing injury list?
Absolutely. I am. If you're looking for one concern, what's on the forefront of your mind as to what could create a stumbling block for Georgia, it's not having the consistency, if we're just keeping a theme, of the same players on the field and building the chemistry. And, it takes time to learn the idiosyncrasies of a receiver running a route. I mean, heck, half the injury list seems to come from one position group. And quite honestly, the players that have been called upon have responded admirably. But if you're another team, they very easily could have pointed to this list of injuries and said, here's the reason why we've stumbled. And there'd be some legitimacy there. Now, I give credit to the coaching staff to having so many players ready to play and stepping up in a high level, and you're not seeing a drop-off in performance that's notable or citable. But, I mean, that's a lot of guys. There's only so many reps that you can get in practice and so many opportunities that you have to get guys prepared for a Saturday. And when you're limited in numbers now, I mean, you're asking guys to step up and, credit the recruiting, credit the preparation, because we haven't seen that become a limiting factor up to this point. But you better believe it matters when you don't have your best players out there when you're going against the best teams. My hope is that there's opportunities, and it seems like there are, for most of these guys to heal and come back and contribute when it hopefully, quote-unquote, matters most at the end of the season. But you have to get there first.
John, terrific stuff. Thanks for being here as a part of our Classic City Lager Insider Update here today. We will look forward to obviously getting a chance to speak to you soon. And when we're having these conversations week after week, it is just so much fun to talk about this team right now. I can tell you're enjoying it as much as we are, and I just can't wait to do it with you again next week there as well.
Well, I'm enjoying it, and I'll be honest, I've enjoyed your series with Chef John. So now we can pair some Classic City Lager with some classy tailgate. What was it? Connor was doing hot dogs.
That's right.
Well done ribs. I mean, I'm enjoying the series. So I'm stepping my tailgate game up, too, to try to match the performance of the Bulldogs and what Chef John's bringing to the table.
Well, that's all good stuff there as well. Yeah, we take tailgating pretty seriously around here. So whether it be the beverages that you're drinking, like Classic City Lager, the food that you're eating, it's all really, really important to us. And, John, I know you feel the same way.
Absolutely.
All right, we'll talk to you. Yeah, thanks a lot. Yeah, good stuff. Thank you.
Let's take a look around the rest of the league. This is SEC3.
All right, really good stuff there from John Stinchcomb. And I'm about to make a fun announcement here in a moment. Before that, though, let me just say very, very quickly that John uses a really important word there when it comes to Georgia and the attention. Being number one, ESPN's College Game Day calls it hard-earned. I think that's right. if game day was anywhere else other than Athens on Saturday, it'd be an insult to these Georgia players. And if any team other than Georgia was ranked number 1 right now, it'd be an insult to these Georgia players. They've earned the right to get the attention they're getting. I, for one, am glad they're getting it, and obviously we'll talk a lot about that throughout the week. But for now, though, here on our SEC through on DawgNation Daily, I also want to take a moment to welcome back and celebrate, back with us for the first time in a while, our friends from Royal Caribbean. We're going to go cruising around the SEC courtesy of Royal Caribbean. And here's the thing you got to know. It's cruising time again. Cruising is back. And those vacations, it's time to get them going. It's time to get planning, especially this when it comes to Royal Caribbean. Because I will tell you, in hearing from folks who have been, asking about Royal Caribbean and kind of getting back on a ship again and doing that fun stuff again, like the one thing I kept hearing over and over and over again is how much people, either they've had a chance to experience it before or maybe they're looking forward to experience it for the first time, specifically Perfect Day, Coco Cay, that private island right there in the Bahamas, and all the fun things that Royal Caribbean has for you right there when it comes to that. What an amazing, amazing getaway this is as a part of so many of the cruise destinations that Royal Caribbean provides there, whether it's the tallest water slide in North America, whether it's the largest freshwater pool in the Bahamas. There's a helium balloon that literally takes you like 450 feet in the air. There's like floating cabanas, which is like the coolest thing in the world to me, it seems like. It's all a part of your experience when you go to Perfect Day, Coco Cay. That private island of the Bahamas is a part of so many of the Royal Caribbean cruises. So it's time to get your cruise vacation planned. It's time to be a part of that. And as a way of making this easy for you, I want to invite you to check out my friends at the Cruise and Vacation Authority. That's the Royal Caribbean's official partner for some of this kind of stuff. Obviously, the Cruise and Vacation Authority is owned by 2 Dawg alumni, so 2 former UGA students and graduates, big Dawg fans, and also big travel fans there as well, experts on getting your Royal Caribbean cruise planned. So check out the Cruise and Vacation Authority. Website is tcava.com. That's tcava.com, or you can give them a call, 770-952-8300. That's 770-952-8300. Cruise and Vacation Authority. Royal Caribbean is back. Time to cruise again. And if you haven't been to Perfect Day, Coco Cay, now is the time to get there and do a great thing with all of that. All right, let's cruise around the SEC here, courtesy of Royal Caribbean just for a moment. And obviously the big news in the SEC over the weekend was the loss for Alabama. And on this show, it'll certainly be treated by a lot of our audience as a big deal that Texas A&M is the team that beats Alabama. So I'll do the A&M part of this in a moment. Let me say this about Alabama first. You've heard it said before that you don't want to let a crisis go to waste. And there's obviously the thought here that Alabama won't let this loss go to waste, the chance to get better now because of the loss. Alabama can obviously still run the table, win all its games, win the SEC West, and still be in fine shape for the college football playoff, which gives you plenty of opportunity to win the national championship there as well. All of this is still out in front of Alabama. So the result is not necessarily a season ender for Alabama, but it is a narrative changer. I've been telling you, hey, because, go back and listen. I'd been pretty good on Alabama the last couple of weeks. I thought that they would struggle at Florida. They did. I thought they would handle business against Ole Miss. Crimson Tide did do that. On Saturday, I thought it was going to be the next step in what Alabama typically does in the month of October, which is go on one of these runs, dominating teams in Bryant-Denny, on the road, wherever else. And right now, Alabama's just not capable enough to do that. So this is what Saturday really means. It doesn't end the season for Alabama. It doesn't prove one way or another whether they will or won't win the national championship. Season goals remain intact. But Alabama showed you it's not a perfect football team right now. It's not. They don't have the offensive firepower they've had in the past. They don't have the deep stable of running backs. They are dealing with injuries there. This is the kind of team that fell prey to what Zach Calzada. And Calzada had not really been good against anybody. And from a statistical standpoint, ends up being as good as almost any quarterback's ever been against the Tide during the Nick Saban era. So the way things changed on Saturday was that Alabama showed you that they may be the best team in this year. We don't know that yet or not, but they are not the best of recent Alabama teams. There have been better teams in the past. And so that's kind of what Saturday was about on the Alabama side. As far as the Texas A&M part of this goes, a lot of y'all have given me a lot of grief over the fact that, I have been pretty high on the Jimbo Fisher era there at Texas A&M. I did not pick them on Saturday, so I'm not going to gloat too much about a game that I actually didn't correctly pick because I was not on Texas A&M this particular Saturday. But I told you a lot during the offseason that I am a believer in what Jimbo is building from a program standpoint there in College Station. And even though this clearly was below the level that I expected the Aggies to be, at least through the first half of the regular season, did not have them losing to Arkansas. I certainly didn't have them losing to Mississippi State. Despite all of that, I told you a couple of weeks ago that my overall thoughts on the trajectory of Jimbo Fisher and the trajectory of the Aggies hadn't changed. I still thought the arrow was pointing up. This is one of the things that I think kind of got lost in the offseason a little bit. You know, people remember the rubber chicken booster club type comment that Jimbo made where he said they were going to beat Alabama while Saban was still there. But the fact is, that wasn't the only thing that Jimbo said to that effect during the offseason. Some of his SEC Media Day comments got obscured because of the Texas and Oklahoma news breaking on the same day that Jimbo was in Hoover for SEC Media Days. The fact they were coming to the SEC, Sooners and Longhorns, kind of cast a shadow on Jimbo being at SEC Media Days, but Jimbo spoke very confidently about his team there. Yes, they still don't have the offensive weapons, and despite a good day against Alabama, this is still a team that's looking for week-to-week offensive consistency. But there's no doubt that Fisher's building something there in College Station. And I think that you're going to see more of this. There were obviously a couple of big streaks that came to an end with this game. Alabama had a 100-game streak or so of wins against unranked opponents. That's now over with. It's one of the most amazing streaks, I think, in all of college football. Their success against these unranked opponents, more difficult to do than you might imagine, as long as they possibly did it. Jimbo becomes the first former Saban assistant to get a win against him. I'm a little sad about that. I wanted Kirby Smart to be the guy that was able to do that, but Jimbo kind of gets that nod for himself. Jimbo had been Saban's offensive coordinator for a national championship there at LSU. I guess you can say that if Kirby does it later on, he's the first former Alabama Saban assistant to get a win against him. I guess you'll have to say it like that. But a very, very interesting day in College Station for a number of reasons there with all of that. You also saw what happened in Oxford on Saturday with the Ole Miss-Arkansas shootout. This was a ton of fun to watch, and I think that it's important to take away this, that while Ole Miss moved the ball better against Arkansas's defense than Georgia did the week before, Georgia also kind of did only what it needed to do against Arkansas. The real comparison game here is the fact that Arkansas could have scored 100 points against Ole Miss if the game lasted long enough for them to do so. But they were never scoring against Georgia. A team that scored 0 points against Georgia went to Oxford and was just scoring at will against the Rebels. If you want some context for how good Georgia's defense is, watching what Arkansas does against Ole Miss, I think, is an example of that. Kentucky now comes into Athens on Saturday on a little bit of a hot streak, fresh off the win against Florida 2 weeks ago. They also get the win against LSU there as well. The Ed Orgeron era would seem to be on thin ice here. I don't think there's any questioning that here at this point. But for Kentucky, boy, they bring a lot of steam into Athens on Saturday. Now, Georgia's also more than a 3-touchdown favorite, as they should be against the Wildcats on Saturday. But no question that there is a lot of attention on the Wildcats now at 7-0. And if the 4-0 wasn't all that great the last 2 weeks, Kentucky's really asserted itself well against LSU and Florida, two teams at the beginning of the season that you probably would have thought were more likely than not Wildcat losses. Right now, there is a living, breathing team on the other side of UGA on Saturday. It's an undefeated Kentucky who still controls its own destiny in the SEC East. We'll spend a lot of time talking about the Wildcats, as you might imagine, getting ready for that game on Saturday. But given the fact this is the third time Georgia's been on game day, given the fact that Georgia was also on CBS this past week, you can probably expect to see a good bit of talk about the Kentucky part of this, especially early in the week, early in the game. They're going to want to hype this up, CBS and ESPN both. So expect to hear a lot about Kentucky being at 7-0 and how they've gotten there. I saw a tweet from Tom Hart, who I guess he did the Kentucky LSU game on Saturday night. I thought this was really funny. So, Kentucky quarterback Will Levis is a little bit of an interesting character. Connor tweeted a video the other day of him putting mayonnaise in his coffee. There's the video that's been out there of him eating a banana with, not taking the peel off, just eating the peel on the banana. And he's a little bit of a weird guy. And Tom Hart, the SEC Network broadcaster, tweeted something to the effect of that Will Levis was like 80% Brady, 20% Gronk. I might somewhat dispute the percentages there. It may be a little bit more 50-50 because I think that Levis has got a lot more Gronk in him than he has Tom Brady. But overall, that's probably a pretty good comparison for an interesting character at Kentucky and a guy who's really kind of brought a little bit of balance to the force there with, the way that they are starting to do things offensively when you kind of typically think of those Mark Stoops teams being, strong with the running game, good on defense. There's a little bit more of that going on with the passing game right now for Kentucky, and obviously Will Levis gets a lot of credit for that. We'll also say this. If you want to make a list of all the things I'm wrong about, all the preseason chatter going into the start of the season, I've been right about plenty. The thing that I am the wrongest on, though, is Tennessee. I had Tennessee as one of the couple of worst teams in the SEC to begin the season, and Tennessee won again on Saturday. Had a big early lead there against South Carolina, really, really asserting itself offensively at the beginning of that game. And, both in terms of the fact that the November date between Georgia and Tennessee now seems more interesting, and a lot of the other things that are going on right now, Tennessee is certainly worth your attention. They score points at will. Did it against South Carolina, did it against Missouri. Their only loss is a game against Pitt, in which they also were kind of moving the football pretty well there. This is a team right now that's doing some things. Pretty impressive, all the way around. Pretty interesting stuff there from the Vols, and a team that's going to probably be generating more attention, especially as you head towards a late season showdown between Georgia and Tennessee. So worth paying attention to there. That is Cruising Around the SEC, courtesy of our friends at Royal Caribbean. We'll make that your SEC through as well. So we have a lot of fun Golden Shoes to get to over the course of the next couple of days, as you might imagine. Celebratory with the win against Auburn, all the other crazy things that are going on. But I also have to do this in a somewhat self-serving way as a Golden Shoe winner for today. So we're getting ready to do the post-game show on Saturday, and some of the Georgia fans that were still up top there leaving the stadium were like, hey, BA, you got to do the Garth Brooks thing, going back to when I had, danced a little bit after the Georgia game against Clemson. So I tried to give the people what they want. So if you're watching on video, this was late in the show. Josh Johansson shared this. He says, I love DawgNation Daily, but I do have to ask, who'd win a dance contest between Dan Mullen and BA? Yeah, unfortunately, if my dancing skills are being compared to Dan Mullen, that shows you how poor of a dancer I really am. But listen, sometimes it's not about the quality of the dancing. It's about the reason that you are dancing, and another Georgia win in a tough stadium, a good reason to do that. So, Josh, appreciate you sharing that. I'll give myself the golden shoe for today and remind you, Gator Hater Countdown, Dogs, 19 days from now, they're going to be Florida, and you better believe I'm going to be pulling out some dancing and some Garth Brooks and everything else after that one. We'll see you tomorrow. DawgNation Daily, presented by Pella Window and Door of Georgia. Yeah, listen, I'm not proud of my dancing skills. They're not very good, but I am happy to have plenty of reasons to dance on a night like Saturday night there at Auburn. Deep South's oldest rivalry goes the way of the Dogs once again. We'll take a lot of your comments on that right now as part of our R.S. Andrews Cool Down. Of course, R.S. Andrews is the one you turn to for your air conditioning, heating, plumbing, and electric needs. You can find them on time. They'll show up on time, but you find them online. So follow me on this. You find them online to show up on time, and then they'll do the work that's promised for you. It's rsandrews.com, air conditioning, heating, plumbing, and electric. Also, our buddy Dari Payro knocking out of the park with his picks each week as a part of Go With The Flow, presented by R.S. Andrews there as well. So all of that is really fun. All right, your comments. Let's do Facebook first, and then we'll do YouTube, more on DawgNation.com. And we'll probably be pretty quick here today because I do have a couple of things I have to do. So apologies in advance on that. But let's have some fun, and let's do all of that. Joey Waddell wondering about Jermaine Burton. Yeah, I guess the groin injury is what's been mentioned there for Burton. Not able to go on Saturday. We'll hopefully get more of an update from Kirby Smart on that today, but it's groin injury that's been talked about there. Brad Hotnett says, dance like nobody is watching. Yeah, I guess that's kind of the way that I kind of try to handle all of that. And, it's like I don't mind laughing at myself, right? I'm more than happy to do all that. And, like the guys were up there at the top of the stand, like, hey, BA, do the Garth Brooks. And so, yeah, you better believe I'm going to have some fun with that. Jacob O'Neill says, how do you feel about that Texas A&M win? I feel maybe a little validated. I do think the Aggies are, building something kind of interesting there. I think they're the best long-term threat to Alabama in the SEC West. I did not pick Texas A&M on this past Saturday, so I'm not going to go crazy, break my, arm trying to pat myself in the back here. But, yeah, overall, I mean, I told you, even after the losses, even after all of the things that A&M had endured the first half of the regular season, that I felt like the program is still in pretty good shape. So I didn't have a problem with that. Let's see what else. Yeah, Hugh Nash says, dance like nobody's watching, or in my case, certainly hope that nobody's watching. Yeah, my dance skills will never get me on on video or TV for any other reason other than to mock. That's certainly true. Alan Bryan says, I think we're going to be able to run against Kentucky. LSU had some success there on the ground. Yeah, LSU, that's been one of the biggest struggles for that team this year. So if they are doing that with success, you certainly would believe that Georgia has a chance to do a lot more of that there too. Jamie Huff says, I feel like we can win it all with Stetson Bennett. Yeah, I mean, look, I think to beat Alabama or the very best team in the country, if that's not Alabama other than Georgia, then obviously I think that's a game that you want JT Daniels for. But right now, I am confident that Georgia can continue to do what it is doing if Bennett's playing. For instance, I've got no problem with Bennett playing this Saturday against Kentucky. Do you want JT back for Florida? Maybe that's an appropriate timeline. Maybe plays this week. But here's like the one thing, and we'll do more of the Daniel stuff this week, I promise. But here's the one thing I think that you probably should assume, and my assumptions have been wrong on this quarterback stuff before, but as we talked about a lot last week, for some reason I can't quite get to where I want to be today. I got a bunch of wires back here, and the microphone feels like it's kind of in the way. But anyway, here's the one thing that we should all assume, that if Daniels is not a full go participant on Monday and Tuesday of practice, those are the most physical practices. Those are the most intense practices. Those are the practices that are most game-like. If Daniels is not a full participant at that point in time in the week for Georgia, then the odds of him starting, I would say, are pretty low. And the odds of him playing the entirety of the game, the quarterback spot, I would say are almost zero. And we spent some time on this last week, that it's not just about being healthy enough to play on Saturday. It's about being healthy enough to be a full participant in practice during the week. And this is about a couple of things for me. It's about, if you want the best of JT Daniels, who is, I think, a sensational quarterback when he's healthy, if you want the best of JT Daniels, then you have to be practicing in the game plan against quality competition in order to be the most ready you can possibly be for Saturday. That's just true for anybody. But here's the other thing, is that there is a symbolic value to the quarterback position. And right now, Smart, going back to this past week, was toughness, talking about all the ways in which he thought his team showed a lot of toughness. Well, if you want to keep that toughness going, how you practice is one of the big determinations of how tough that you are. And I think symbolic gestures matter in that regard. And giving your offensive players, especially knowing how banged up Georgia is, a chance to rally around the quarterback that they practice with, I do think that's a part of this. So I think if you want to know when Daniels is likely to come back, I think it's based on at what point in time is he fully able to practice on the Mondays and Tuesdays of those practice weeks. And that doesn't mean he should rush it. That doesn't mean that, that there's something deficient with him that he might not be available. If he's in too much pain to deliver the football, then he's not the best option for Georgia. But when he is comfortable enough with the muscle issues that he's dealing with to be able to be a full participant in practice and then be also healthy enough to go in the game on Saturday, that's when I think that Daniels is coming back. And my assumption would be, risky though it is, my assumption would be that it's not happening before then. Brian Jones says the offensive line gave Bennett all day to throw. Yeah, I think the pass protection this year has been really pretty good for Georgia. Keith Finney says, I don't think he plays this weekend. I think that if you want to give him the extra week of rest, I think that Stetson Bennett's allowing you to do that. You got to give Bennett credit for the way that he's playing. It's really pretty remarkable. And as I said before, the offensive system that Todd Monken has really works. That it's almost like one of these turnkey solutions where it works with Daniels. You can take Daniels out. You can put Stetson Bennett in. It seems to be working with him. You can take away the wide receivers that you thought you were going to have, and it's working with the A.D. Mitchells, the Ladd McConkeys of the world. All of this just seems to be really working right now and seems to be doing a good job. Yes, sir.
I would note practice is closed today.
Yeah.
And this is, again, sort of just an inkling. I do think JT Daniels plays this weekend.
Okay. So do you think that on Tuesday, because by then you'll have had 2 practices in the week, do you think if Smart were asked directly, has JT Daniels been a full participant in practice, do you think he'll answer that question directly if asked on Tuesday?
Probably not.
Yeah, and so that's
which is why like practice is closed today,
Yeah.
and I think they're trying to keep this as under wraps and keep Kentucky guessing because now, I mean, there's certainly enough out there where you do have to prepare for Bennett, and I think there's enough difference between the way that Bennett plays and the way JT Daniels plays. There is an advantage in keeping this a guessing game as long as they can.
I think that's exactly right, and that is worth paying attention to. Interesting to hear Connor say that he thinks Daniels comes back. I've told you before that let me say two things at once here. While I just said a moment ago that Bennett is playing well enough that you can earn the rest for Daniels if you want it, to be at your best for a Florida or as you head towards the rest of the season, giving some on-ramp for that I think is also valuable. So if Daniels is healthy, then there's no reason to rest him because you want to be at your best, clicking, in sync, in rhythm for that Florida game 2 Saturdays from now. So if there's any possibility that Daniels is able to fully practice and able to give you what you need during the week, then yeah, you put him out there against Kentucky. You hope that you have that offensive rhythm, and you hope that leads into a game coming up 2 weeks after that against Florida where you have a chance to kind of keep that going a little bit more. It's not, to me, advisable, especially given the fact you got the off week mixed in there, for Daniels to kind of be coming back cold for that Florida game because while, things might work out fine, probably would, it just seems nicer to think you could be in rhythm before that. One of the things we'll talk about this week, too, is, and maybe this comes up with Kirby here today, although I don't know if this is on people's radar quite as much, Georgia's history of games going into the bye week is not great. And that's probably coincidence. That's probably not much of anything, but everybody makes a big deal about, noon starts and things like that. For the most part, I think that's overblown because a lot of that is, dating back to 2016 when Georgia just wasn't a very good period and playing a lot of games at noon. But even good Georgia teams have had a little bit of trouble with that, week before the bye, games closer than they were supposed to be, things like that. So probably we'll give you more of the numbers as the week goes on, but probably a little bit of an idea of, hey, can you emphatically end the unofficial first half of your regular season with that game against Kentucky on Saturday? Obviously, the presence of JT Daniels would be nice there in that regard, even though I've been very happy with what Georgia's gotten from Stetson Bennett. And I think that his status as a true DGD is fully confirmed and well earned. Matt Rukavina also talking about the Auburn secondary having no answer for Darnell Washington. Washington is just, he's really a marvel. I saw him on the field Saturday, prior to the game, and he's just so big. He's just a giant of a man. And I was joking about this. So in my neighborhood, I've got my son and some neighborhood kids. A lot of times I get out there and play football with them. And most of the time, I'm all-time quarterback, right? That's just kind of the thing. But every now and then, there are not enough kids for that to be the case, and so I have to kind of be on a team. And most of the time, if I'm on a team, I'm the quarterback for that team there as well. But every now and then, for whatever reason, we need a completion. We need to move the chains in the, cul-de-sac football game. And so if we really need a completion, then I'll go be a receiver and I'll just just hold my arms up and just catch the ball. The kids are below me trying to grab it. That's what Darnell Washington looks like. He looks like the dad that goes to receiver in the kids' game and just catches the ball, over the kid's head. He's just really a physical specimen. And to even see him without pads on, you just realize there's just very few players like him in terms of just the size that he brings to the table. Jamal Lett says they should be throwing to Washington more often and featuring him on the outside. So they did move him. They flexed him out all the way wide in the red zone at one point in time on Saturday, and they did throw to him right there. He's just back from injury. He played last week, and this weekend took that next step towards playing and also being targeted, and I'm guessing you see a lot more of that to come here. Let's see what else. Kevin Flute says someone recently called me a blowhard. Well, I'd probably call myself a blowhard. I do that a pretty good bit. He says, but DawgNation appreciates your work and your love for UGA. Keep up the great work. That's very nice of you to say. I appreciate that. Here's the one thing I have very thick skin about. It is a big ask to allow someone to let you be inside their earbuds for an hour a day. That's a big, big ask. And so the same way that if you have company staying over at your house for a couple of days, after a while that just kind of gets a little tiresome and wears thin. Or if you're talking about dinner companion, things like that, after a while, people just kind of want their personal space a little bit. And so I totally have great respect for that. And much the same way you don't want, company staying around too long, getting too close to you. there's this even greater level of intimacy when you think about putting in earbuds, putting in headphones, which is the way a lot of people consume this content, and you have my voice ringing around in your ear. So one of the things I have great respect for is the idea of, hey, every now and then I may say something that may make somebody mad, and they may criticize me for whatever reason, or they may just listen so frequently that eventually they just get aggravated with me about something. I've got great respect for that. And I'm thankful that somebody will rip off some sort of tweet or email or whatever, like, you suck, blah, 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 blah. But they still come back, right? And I'm thankful for that because I realize that it's hard to it's one of the reasons why I'm kind of slow to criticize broadcasters during a game, because it's hard to listen to 2 or 3 people talk for 4 hours without getting irritated at something that they say. That's just a long time to listen to dudes talk. And for me, speaking more than an hour in this format each and every day, every now and then I'm going to say something that's going to make me seem like a blowhard to somebody. You got to shake that off. You got to have thick skin about that, and I try to. And listen, I'm grateful that even when I am a blowhard, people still come back and allow me to entertain them, and I certainly appreciate that. Let's see what else. Joel Moody says all-time quarterback is the best backyard position ever. It really is. And because I like trying to put the ball in the money, especially with when you have a couple of good kids going at each other a little bit. You want to try to get the throw where it needs to be into a tight window or something like that. So yeah, I definitely take that. I definitely take that pretty seriously. I do enjoy doing that. All right, let's get a couple more here. Jamie Huff says, can JT stay healthy? Yeah, I mean, as it stands right now, I don't have any criticism of Daniels for the injuries that he sustained. And obviously that's always going to be the kind of thing people kind of wonder of, well, is there something that he should have done or somebody could have done to prevent this from happening? I just don't think there is. Muscle injuries are a little challenging. They're a little tough. And, the knee thing was kind of what it was. But I don't really see anything from Daniels here that makes me say, well, this is his issue. This is something that he should have done differently. I mean, luck is a part of football, and how healthy you are or healthy you're not is not fully in your own control, but it does play a huge factor in the outcome of these games there as well. Thomas Van Sena says Georgia has the best fans, hands down. Yeah, no question about that. DSGB Gaming says I'm the man. I appreciate that. Thank you very much for that, DSGB. Appreciate that. Jay Shipe says, was Bama losing a cry to help not to play Georgia and Atlanta and to keep that fraud coaching at Texas A&M? So Jay Shipe's not changing his mind anytime soon. James Dykes goes back to the great line from Kirby Smart that we're not practicing to beat anyone. We're practicing to beat everyone. It's great quote from Smart earlier this season. Really, really strong stuff. Crow King 123 and the subject of the guest picker for game day on Saturday. So there was a clear UGA theme to this a couple of weeks ago with Harris English fresh off the Ryder Cup win. We sort of thought that might be who got the nod, and he did. It's not always a local themed person that gets a chance to do it, and given the fact they're back in Athens again, if they just want to pull like the generic celebrity here, this would probably be a good time to do it. Maybe they go the Kentucky route on them. Not even sure who that'd really be. Somebody mentioned Anthony Ant-Man Edwards there. That'd be kind of a fun one there on that. I know Ant-Man was a big football guy. At one point in time, he was a very good football player, really good football player. And so I know he likes football a lot. Football probably his first love. So I'm sure he follows it closely. But I don't quite get the sense of who that guest picker is going to be as of yet and whether or not that person is going to have an obvious tie to UGA. But I guess we'll find out later on. Jason Rhodes says, does Georgia blow it this year as they always do? I mean, they might. I mean, who knows? But I don't know that I would really say that it's blowing it if that's what Georgia indeed does. Georgia right now is in the position to try to win the national championship. You can make a case they are in the best position to do so. But it's not guarantee of anything. But it's not it's not one of these things of, oh, man, if Georgia does win the national championship, I guess they choked. No, Georgia right now is one of those teams that's in a position to go out there and get it done. Most of the country would be very envious of the position that Georgia's in, but nothing's guaranteed. And you just sort of have to accept that, and you just sort of have to go out there and see what you can do. And that's kind of the position that Georgia's in right now. Jermaine King says Ant-Man never watched basketball. He says actually still doesn't watch basketball during the off days. That's kind of interesting. Let me read this comment here on YouTube for a moment. Caleb Newberry says, if this team can get healthy, they're lethal. We're doing this with numerous starters out, but don't get cocky. That's the only thing that scares me with the number one ranking. But this also isn't rigged. Yeah, I mean, the success they've had, despite the injuries that they've, dealt with, is pretty remarkable. And here's the only thing I'll say about the getting cocky because of the ranking stuff and things like that. It's not logical that being highly ranked is more likely to hurt you than help you. For some reason, because of the Saban rat poison line being so prominent and Saban saying that, it's just become accepted wisdom that it's bad to be praised. But if anything, praise is if anything, it's just as likely to help you as hurt you, right? Because it becomes the status that you want to achieve. When you get that taste of the attention, when you get that taste of being the place to be in college football, the one that everybody's paying attention to, you want to stay that way. I mean, I think there's the possibility that's true. I mean, not all motivation has to be negative. In fact, I think most people tell you that positive reinforcement probably works better than anything else. So when you have the spotlight of the sport on you, you kind of want to keep it that way. I think what's really true is, for a lot of fans, myself maybe included, that when you get all this attention and if eventually it does go away, then it makes it maybe hurt a little later on there at that point in time. That's probably true, but there's nothing we can do about that. But the idea that it's accepted as conventional wisdom that praise is more bad than good, I don't think logic dictates that's necessarily the case. Reformation Logistics says Chase Elliott. Chase was on game day week 1. Now, I thought he was the guest picker. Somebody said he was just the guest. But Chase from Charlotte, given the NASCAR ties, was on there week 1. James Briley says, how nice would it have been to have the late touchdown after Auburn's timeout? So I have a total confession here for a moment. I'll bring you behind the scenes. Unless the game is like going down to the wire, with about 5 or so minutes left in regulation, I start getting ready for the postgame show. That means I'm going to the bookstore in Athens, or I'm going from the press box down to the field level on the road. So if it's 34 to whatever, I'm doing that. I totally missed all of this. Like, I knew that Auburn was calling some timeouts, and I didn't really know why. I just figured Brian Harsin was just a weird guy. Like, I had no idea that they called the timeout. Kirby got mad and then threw deep. I didn't know this until this morning. I had no idea about any of that. I was actually reading about this before the show. And, it's like we try to get the post-game show on as quick as we possibly can. And that means I'm trying to, get it set up and get ready. There's not like magical fairies and elves that set up the camera and stuff like that. A human being has to do it. And, oftentimes that's going to be me.
I used to be that fairy and elf.
Yeah. Kind of used to be the elf that did all of that. But the point is somebody's got to do it one way or another. And so I had no idea about this. Now, obviously, if the game was coming down to the wire and we're going to decide who's going to win and lose, and we got to watch that and see how it plays out and then do the post-game show as quick as we possibly can. But if it's a blowout game, I'm usually trying to steal a couple of minutes and get on the air quickly before y'all move on and start doing something else. We lose the chance to capture you as an audience. So the point is, like I said, a couple people brought up the timeout things, and I had known that Harsin was taking timeouts. I did not know that Kirby Smart threw deep right then. I'm just telling you right now. I apologize for that. I did not know that until today, this morning. G. Grace Bama Boys. Come on, G. You got to be more gracious in defeat. First of all, it's good that you're here because I knew you would be. You're a stand-up guy. But to say that A&M got lucky, come on. You got to be more gracious in defeat than that. West Georgia Dog fan says, so what you're saying is you start preparing after halftime. Not completely after halftime, but once you see that the game is, once the storyline is established, you start making your way down it. Because I won't get into all the details, but like moving about in these stadiums is not as easy sometimes you think it might be because the coaches' boxes, they hold the elevators for the coaches. There's just all kinds of like weird logistical things that you have to try to navigate. You got to move relatively quick. Otherwise, you get pinned in either by the coaches coming down from the coaches' boxes or the fans once they start, leaving the stadium. There's a certain science to how you move about a stadium before you get kind of locked in there. Thomas Van Santa says he's cooked for Bill Elliott. That's really cool. Let's see what else. Jacob Phillips says this morning the SEC Network tried to find a reason that Kentucky puts up a better game than Arkansas did versus UGA. Is Kentucky better than Arkansas in any area? That's actually a really good question. Is Kentucky better than Arkansas? I mean, I guess the honest truth is I just don't know yet. I mean, here's the one thing that you can kind of safely assume, that the issue that will zero in the most heading into this game against Kentucky is Will Levis throwing to Wan'Dale Robinson. Like, that's the issue we're going to zero in on the most, because that's not really what Arkansas did to Georgia. You kept thinking, oh, is this the big strike? Is this, Jefferson, who, by the way, watching that Ole Miss game, KJ Jefferson's got the slowest windup I've ever seen in my life. He's like one of these pitchers from like the 1920s, like with the big windup to get ready to throw it. But nonetheless, Jefferson's a pretty good quarterback. Obviously, they got, Traylon Burks, the good receiver, who was banged up a little bit when Georgia played him. But you kept thinking, do they get a chance to take that big strike and allow themselves to do in one play what they can't do over the course of a long drive, which is get yardage against Georgia? Didn't happen. Levis, the big arm, Robinson, the respected target. Do they have more of a chance to do that this particular Saturday? If Kentucky has any chance to keep it closer than the experts think, that's kind of where that comes in at. Let me go back to DawgNation.com for a moment. RX Dog says SEC Shorts was really funny this week. Is that the one about the Georgia defense being the home security system? That's a very funny premise. Charlie, thank you for the kind words over here on the DawgNation homepage. I really appreciate that. A lot of you have been very kind to watch me there on Peachtree TV on Friday nights, and I'm having such a good time with that. So much fun. I tell you, high school football in Georgia is a really special thing, and to be even closer to it, getting to know a lot of the coaches, being around the players, man, there's just nowhere you'd rather be on a Friday night. I mean, talk about the luckiest guy in the world. You do these games on Friday, you pack up and you head over towards Auburn on Saturday or back to Athens this upcoming Saturday. We had a good one on Friday night. It's just such a fun time right now. Al Clement says, looking at the young receivers getting playtime and contributing will prove to top receiver recruits that Georgia can coach them up. Yeah, I mean, right now Georgia's really showing both, right? And, I think you do have an obligation of it can't just be, oh, we coached up, the lesser-known guys like A.D. Mitchell or Ladd McConkey. You've got to try to develop the bigger-name targets there as well. A lot of those guys are currently hurt. But when you see the 5 stars, a lot of these right now healthy on defense, and they're all, kind of playing at the level you'd expect them to be playing at. When you see the lesser-known recruits and they're showing really rapid development. First of all, the one part of the recruiting process that we don't talk about probably enough is the degree to which scouting comes into play in all of this. Because, the one thing that Georgia will tell you, and obviously it's easy to say this after the fact, but Georgia will tell you they identified Jordan Davis as one of the most important recruits for their 2018 signing class, even though his recruiting ranking would have had him near the bottom. But Georgia had him identified there at the top, one of the most important guys they signed, they would have said. And it turns out that's true, that Georgia saw the ability to be the elite defensive lineman in Davis at a time in a lot of the community, the recruiting community, and other coaches maybe saw Davis as an offensive guy. And, the same thing for a guy like A.D. Mitchell, whose path to Georgia is kind of non-traditional, right? Didn't play senior year, missed a lot of time on the football field, but apparently Georgia knew it had something in Mitchell. Knew it had something in Ladd McConkey. Now, it's easy to, there's a concept in, journalism called survivor bias where, when you see the people that emerge, like the businesses that succeed, you see a lot of this in business writing, the businesses that succeed, you turn around and kind of reverse engineer how they got there, and it makes it seem easier than it actually was, whereas you can't always predict these things on the front end of a scenario, and so you can fall prey to assuming that for McConkey or Mitchell, a lot of these guys are having success, Jordan Davis on the defensive side of the ball, that it was always destined to be this way. There are plenty of guys I'm sure that Georgia also thought were going to be good that turned out not to be. We just don't know much about those stories. But nonetheless, part of the reason why Georgia's having so much success with unheralded guys is not just because it's developing them, but because Georgia apparently identified talent that the rest of the college football world didn't necessarily see. But if you are, as you said, a Luther Burden or an Andre Green Jr. or some of these recruiting, Oscar Delp, who by the way will make his college decision here this week. a lot of those guys you can't help but assume have very much noticed the way that Georgia's using the talent that it currently has. And Georgia's so thin right now in terms of reliable pass-catching targets, so many injuries, that I'm sure a lot of these guys also, my understanding is that Luther Burden's expected to be in Athens on Saturday. A lot of these guys almost certainly have the belief of not only can Georgia use me, not only can Georgia get something out of me, right now the path to get on the field at Georgia actually looks pretty good there too. So I think all of this works out pretty well for a Georgia 2022 recruiting class that seems to be falling into place.
One thing I just want to add in there, talking about McConkey and Mitchell, tip of the cap there to Cortez Hankton, a guy who has come under a lot of scrutiny, criticism with how this receiver room is played and developed. For those guys to come out and play as well as they did, and you mentioned the whole not being highly recruited, and I think that absolutely goes to Hankton sort of identifying them and finding them and then developing them to get them to a point early on in their careers where they're having big-time contributions. I think Hankton, while he has been criticized, if you look at the way he recruits and the way that these Georgia wide receivers are now being developed, I think he's done an outstanding job.
Did you see the moment in which Cortez Hankton and Ladd McConkey, almost like a windmill dunk thing when they met each other at the high point for the high five? First of all, McConkey's got serious leaping ability. So for Hankton to get up in the air, that's pretty impressive. I thought that was really good all the way around from both Hankton and McConkey.
Did you see Cortez Hankton tweeted about that play?
No, what did he say?
He said on Sunday, I am icing myself up all day after that yesterday.
Good for him, man. That's awesome to see. And you're right. He's done a great job working those guys up. Jermaine King also mentions Cole Spear in our DawgNation.com comment section. Maybe another guy that gets a chance to enjoy some of this in the future. And I tell you, Spear's really, really fast. And he's a good athlete, very good athlete. He's in good physical condition right now. He's seemingly put on a lot of weight. I'm talking about good weight, muscle type weight. So yeah, all of a sudden Georgia now is recruiting a lot of different kinds of receivers. Big guys, fast guys, small slot type guys that can do the short bursts of quickness and make guys miss in small spaces. Georgia's really doing a lot of that kind of stuff. Richard D. says the veterans, so to speak, that aren't injured are playing at an elite level, but I believe the young talent bringing an immeasurable level of energy to the team. And I think that's a lot of times what young talent does. I think Richard's right about that you want to bring in new, fresh blood to a program because it keeps the life moving. It just keeps the energy level high. I don't think there's any doubt that's a contribution there for that. All right, quick final spin around the comment section, then we've got to go. Gerald Harmon said he said that too, so a very good commenter on the Facebook side of things agrees with that there as well. William and Elaine Morgan say 62-0 UGA. How about that? Jacob O'Neill getting ready to check out. Hugh Nash says, special shout out to the Nakobe Dean's kip up on the sideline. That was dope. Yeah, so, some of y'all like wrestling references, some of you don't. But, Shawn Michaels, the Heartbreak Kid, used to always do that where he'd kind of rock back on his hands and then shoot forward. Like, that's an incredibly athletic maneuver. Like, that's a mind-boggling thing. And I'm going to preview something we're going to talk about on the show this week at some point in time. Like, the Heisman right now is very open. Who is even the betting favorite? I'm not even sure. You got the Ohio State running back. He's a part of that. Stroud, the Ohio State quarterback, I think is probably getting back in this discussion now too. So potential split vote coming there from Ohio State. Matt Corral's in there, but they're just not going to win enough games for Corral to win the Heisman. I think a lot of the folks who voted for Lamar Jackson eventually regretted their vote because Louisville lost so many games down the stretch. I don't think we'll see a mediocre team produce a Heisman Trophy winner in the near future. And with due respect to Ole Miss, they're not a nationally elite team. I think that is going to prevent Corral from winning the award. I think, Bryce Young could still do it, but, Alabama losing obviously makes that a little bit more difficult. The point is, the Heisman is wide open right now. Clearly the number one reason why Georgia's doing what it's doing right now is the defense. Like, here's the thing we got to decide. I think that we can get behind a Georgia player, and I don't think it's inconceivable we could get a Georgia player to New York City. Now, I don't think a defensive player can win the Heisman. But in a year when there's not a lot of obvious names, like I said, Ohio State, maybe Alabama quarterback, Matt Corral, but there's no, obvious person to win. I guess if Caleb Williams, stays in Oklahoma, and we didn't even have a chance to talk about that game today, but if he stays in Oklahoma, maybe he could steal it in the second half of the year. And if Daniels were to come back, I mean, there's still enough games left that Daniels could potentially steal it there too. His odds for the Heisman are actually still, fairly short. But the person on the Georgia roster that deserves it most is somebody off this defense. And the point I'm getting to is this. I think you could say that Dean is probably having the best statistical year. And so maybe you want to get behind Nakobe as the defensive player from Georgia that should get the so-called Heisman love. But symbolically, I think it's a little easier to sell Jordan Davis on that for a number of reasons. I mean, I've seen some people on their Heisman list that have had, Davis on there. Like people who are doing the Heisman columns right now are giving Davis a little bit of love. So I've been kind of wrestling with this. Like, do you give it to the guy who probably statistically deserves it the most, which may be Nakobe Dean, or knowing that the Heisman's a little bit of a symbolic award anyway, a lot of it's just representative, best player on best team type stuff. Do you get behind Jordan Davis on this? And if we put a full-fledged campaign together, is there any shot we could get JD to NYC? Boy, that's the campaign right there. Think about the graphic. JD NYC. Ooh, boy, that could be fun. That could be fun. We may talk about this in the show at some point in time. So y'all tell me what you think about that, first of all, I guess is the point that I'm getting to. Marcus Javen says, how about Stetson Bennett for Heisman? Boy, I guess the way he played on Saturday, it's certainly a fun discussion. So Gordon says, can you imagine Jordan Davis in a Heisman House commercial? That would be dope. I believe you on that. It would be so much fun. Jacob Phillips says, huge day for Georgia tight ends on Saturday. Washington and Bowers both had big catches. Yeah, really, really fun. Allison Whitaker says Nakobe could possibly be up for the Buckus Award. Yeah, I think that's a real thing, right? I mean, I think it's a very strong possibility. And for all the next Roquan chatter, if Nakobe really did win the Buckus Award, then, literally speaking, he is the next Roquan Smith, at least in terms of end-of-season type accomplishments. Fishing with Tiny Bass asks a really good question. He says, Game Day and SEC Nation are both in Athens. He says, what's the record for most pregame shows on one campus at one time? I guess this year we've also had Big Noon Saturday and ESPN Game Day on hand for I think it was the Auburn-Penn State game they were both on hand for. So I guess we've had, multiple shows in one spot at the same time. This is not, I hate to spoil this, but this is not what ESPN wanted. I'm sure they would love to have been somewhere else this weekend. But, sometimes the wins and losses greatly affect you on that. All right. We got to go. Real Boss says if JT would have been healthy, he'd be the front runner right now. Yeah, Daniels would have had a great chance at the Heisman had he just been playing, right? It's the quarterback of the number one team is a Heisman favorite of sorts. And, unfortunately for JT, it's just not being on the field right now. All right, final comments here. Jack Leard says Stetson's going to keep doing what he's done this weekend. Y'all forgot that McCarron got Bama to the national championship game and won it. He also had a great defense on the side. Yeah, listen, for me, what Bennett's been doing has been great, and what JT Daniels has a chance to do when he comes back is, I think, really valuable there too. I think all of that is really important. I just think that it's been nice to have Bennett doing what he's doing. It hasn't changed my mind though about the outlook for JT Daniels. Boy, a lot of comments rolling in here. Danny Blackman, thanks for checking in. Wally Smith expecting to be close against Kentucky. That's an interesting prediction. Jermaine King says he's going to flip over to SEC Nation when ESPN's talking about Iowa. I understand where you're coming from on that. All right, we got to go for now. Thanks for being here. We did a fun thing today, and I think it's actually getting ready to take shape here with our friends at the Atlanta Journal-Constitution. Of course, Braves Game 3 at Truist Park this afternoon. I had a chance to do a show this morning we recorded to air kind of right around now on the AJC channels with Michael Cunningham, the Atlanta Journal-Constitution columnist, Gabe Burns, AJC Braves beat reporter, and we got into all that's going to go on with the Braves as the series and the division series shifts back to Atlanta with that series tied at 1. So pretty good stuff there. Gabe Burns, Michael Cunningham, and me. Check out the AJC video channels on that. And if you're an AJC subscriber, don't forget the e-paper's got a Braves pullout special section to give you more coverage of Atlanta in the postseason. Make sure you check that out there. If you haven't become an AJC subscriber, you can go to ajc.com/battleatlanta to take advantage of big savings on an AJC subscription. Get you all that great Braves playoff coverage as the Atlanta Braves rolled through the postseason. Also, coverage of Atlanta. Falcons got a win in London yesterday. First of all, the crowd was amazing. There were a ton of people at that game. Not sure how many of them were Falcons fans, but a ton of people at the game. Our buddy D-Led was there. Atlanta got the 9:30. I wish the Falcons played at 9:30 every Sunday morning. Of course, I'm at church, but still, you kind of come home after church. You kind of roll into the finish of the Falcons game, and then you go right to the kickoff of the 1 p.m. games there in the red zone. Because the honest truth is I love watching red zone. I just like watching the bounce around from game to game. So if you give me a pull-out Falcons game leading into red zone at 1 p.m., that's a pretty fun thing all the way around. So it wasn't a bad day yesterday in the NFL. All right, we got to go for now. So AJC.com, Atlanta Journal-Constitution, big-time coverage of all of that. And, of course, R.S. Andrews online at rsandrews.com for your air conditioning, heating, plumbing, electric needs. They show up on time. They do the work that's promised for the price that's promised. Find R.S. Andrews today. We will see you tomorrow back here, 9:45 for our First and 15 at DawgNation.com and on the DawgNation app. And then 10 a.m. for DawgNation Daily, presented by Pella Window and Door of Georgia. We'll see you then, everybody. For more DawgNation videos, check out youtube.com/DawgNation.